Welcome to From the Mind of Christine McConnell. A couple weeks back, a company that I really love reached out and asked if I could create a 30-second montage of transforming one of the rooms of the house into something really spooky. But the catch was they needed it by Monday and they were asking for it on Thursday. So that gave me 2 days to pull off something hopefully really impressive and then only a single day to edit it. But it did all work out, and today's episode is going to feature all of the fun, detailed how-tos that went into this project. So with that said, let's begin. The very first thing I want to tackle is getting these drapes down that the color of clashes so badly with this room. Get them washed thoroughly, and then I'm going to try to dye them. After washing them twice in the laundry, I'm now going to dye them in the sink just using a powder dye and very hot water. After that, I'm going to finish clearing out the room. A couple of years ago, my friends and also patrons, Michael Simpson and his beautiful daughter Carol Ann, came up from Kentucky and brought me this beautiful antique casket. It had just been sitting in a barn and the lining had rotted and been discarded. And so I've been meaning to reline it and just haven't gotten around to it. Now I very quickly need it done, so I'm going to do the most ridiculously fast and temporary job, just using some scrap fabric that I've saved from previous projects. He thankfully brought it with a little cart that can roll it around, because if he didn't bring this, it would be next to impossible to move. It's just unbelievably heavy. I know it seems odd to cover such a beautiful looking cart, but we do want to make this look almost like there is a funeral happening in the room. And so I'm just going to gather some draperies and just cover this up so it looks kind of uniform and just a little bit more solid. I'm now going to tackle something that I did in the guest room, which is creating this rucheted fan. So I'm just taking a stretch of fabric that's probably about 2 yards across, and I'm just gathering it very tightly on one side. I'm going to staple that right into the center at the bottom, and then just start pulling it out taut and keeping my spacing even. Here I'm cutting in some relief marks, and what this is going to do is allow that fabric to sort of splay out a little bit more naturally without getting any puckering in places I don't want it. Now I'm going to cut out some strips of foam padding and create a border around this fan. So when I say I'm going to rush through this, normally I would spend probably between 2 weeks to maybe even a month working on this kind of a project. But because I have literally hours to pull this off, it is going to be it's going to be a little bit messy, and it's not the sort of thing you're going to want to look at the details too closely. And luckily what we're doing in this room ultimately is making it look really aged and kind of dirty. And so those imperfections are easily going to be masked once this is all finished. Something else that is saving me here is all of this lace is just creating this almost like cupcake effect. And so with all of these ruffles and exaggerated details, you don't really focus on the things that are imperfect, and this just kind of masks all of that even more. To tie the skirt into the interior of the casket, I'm just going to sew on this little valance using scrap materials that I had from the drapes that I did in the den. And I'm just going to sort of ruche and gather them probably 2 or 3 times here in the center, just to give that really nice drapey Victorian look. I need this to look really aged and old, so I've just put some coffee in a spray bottle and I'm just going around and spraying all over all of this material just to kind of make it look dingy and decrepit. With that done, now I can bring in Estelle in her authentic 1800s wedding dress and get her nice and nestled in here. I've sadly had to borrow a few appendages from Estelle over the years, so she is missing a hand and a foot. But we're just going to cover that nub with her other hand and get her ready for her close-up. Okay, that looks so neat, and now I'm going to focus on other areas of the room. I'd like to have a seance happening right in the center of the room, and so I'm setting up a table, chairs, and a crystal ball. And then right behind that, I'm going to hang that haunted painting that I created a few years ago directly over the mantle. My next step is to affix some really fun, interesting looking lighting fixtures. And these I actually got at an estate sale in California back when we lived there. And they used to live right up in the bedroom next to the bed. So now what I'm doing is I'm swapping out all of the light bulbs in the room with these flicker flame bulbs by GE. If you don't see the light bulb directly, they give a pretty realistic flame effect. The only two drawbacks to these are the color's pretty orange and they also don't put off a ton of light. So you will also probably have to add a few sort of discrete accent lights around the room in addition to these. They definitely remind me of Disney's Haunted Mansion or even something you'd see on the Pirates of the Caribbean. I then went around the house and plucked all of the creepiest, most interesting looking oil paintings from the house and brought them in here, and I'll just start strategically placing them around. I found a set of Torchiere floor lamps that were originally from a funeral parlor, and I'll be setting these up right alongside the casket. Now it's time to bring in my guests, and once I get them sort of situated in their chairs, I can begin dressing them for the evening. Several years ago, I took some pictures with gray hair, and I actually had to make my own lace front wig. And so luckily, I still have it, and so now I'm going to affix it to her head, and the lace part, I'm just going to glue down with some latex. One of my favorite memories when we moved into this house was finding a bunch of old Victorian clothes up in the attic, and there was a bunch of men's clothes, and that's pretty much exclusively what I'm using on my gentleman here. Now, the gold and black blouse that is on the female is actually something that I picked up from my friend Matt Pastore from the Syracuse Antiques Exchange. Whenever he gets any like fun Victorian clothing in, he always lets me know and I run over and pick it up if I can. This next piece is a 22-inch wide silver-plated meat dome, and it comes with this beautiful warmer. I've actually borrowed this from my friend Debbie over at the Little Falls Antique Center. I borrowed it because I've actually never come across one in the wild, and I have been looking for one for a long time, so if anyone ever spots one, please let me know. And I'm so jazzed because I've disliked those drapes for so long, pretty much since the day we got here, and they took the color really well. So now we're going to shift gears to aging the room using greenery. The look I'm going for is hopefully to make it look like this room has been absolutely forgotten to time, and the windows broken out and just the plants outside are coming inside. And so I've just got some vines, and with little push pins, I'm just going to start pinning them around, making it look like they're creeping in from this window. This step alone was just making a huge difference, and it was so exciting to see the room kind of transform and almost look like one of those scenes from the movie Jumanji. I had such a blast scouring the whole house for all of these little spooky items that I've been collecting for years now, and getting to bring them all into one space to really create an impactful theme. This next task is pretty funny because I need the look of a kind of a red wine stain on the table, but at the same time, I don't want to damage my beautiful tablecloth, so this is the solution we came up with. I had some silk chiffon left over from my Halloween costume last year, and so I dyed it a little bit dark, and now I've just flattened it out on the table, and I'm going to cut out kind of a spill shape as best I can. And then from there, I'm going to smear a little bit of a fruit preserve inside the cup, and hopefully this will make it look like there was some sort of drink in there that dehydrated and dried out. Several years back, I used some dried out Spanish moss from the craft store around my living room at the mountain house, and I had a terrible allergic reaction to it, but I needed it so badly for this that I was like, well, I'll just wear a dust mask. But thankfully, I don't know what was going on, but I didn't have any kind of a reaction this time. So maybe it was just that brand that I had an issue with. But this stuff just worked great, and it made those artificial plants really kind of look real. Oh, something really important. This Spanish moss is very flammable, and I know this because I dropped a little tiny bit into the lit fireplace when the room was done, and it ignited so quickly it was frightening. So obviously keep that far away from candles. Make sure you're always fully in the room if you're lighting candles or having fires. And then in addition to that, just make sure you've got easy to access and visible fire extinguishers at all times, because obviously this is super fun to do, but you definitely don't want to turn your house into an empty lot filled with angry, unhoused ghosts. The captive didn't really trust the antique hinge on this door, so we put a bar in here, and now I'm just covering it with moss to just disguise that a little bit. If ever there was a place that Chauncey, my haunted doll, belonged, it's in this room. So he got positioned right at the door, functioning as the maitre d'. I made this bat lamp a few years ago, and I've never known quite where to put it, and this seems to be the perfect spot. I couldn't color code the accent lamps that are going to be tucked away in the room to match those flame bulbs exactly. So I've just got some parchment paper and transparent airbrush paint, and I've tinted it to just a specific shade that I think will work. I've painted that all over it. Once it's dried, I'm cutting it out into squares, and I'm just going to use one piece of Scotch tape to cover the light, and it should get it to match exactly to those bulbs. Okay, we are approaching the finish line, and now I'm going to start spreading webs around the room using my Webcaster Gun attached to an air compressor. This is my favorite go-to method of creating movie-looking webs around a room. And now I'm going to experiment this time with some, like a kind of an additional technique that will hopefully make them look even more realistic. A great tip I can share with you here is if you really want those webs to look amazing, take some push pins and pin them at kind of odd places around the room, and then take thread either in black or clear and stretch it across from one pin to the next, and this gives those webs something to grab onto and drape from. Something else that's really great about these is you can actually stretch them and pull them into different positions and get them to cling to random little edges around the room if you don't like how they're laying. And then once you've got kind of a framework that you're happy with, then you can start doing these spirals, and it really kind of gives it a natural, organic spiderweb kind of a look. Now to try something a little experimental. I don't like how the Webcaster creates shiny webs because natural webs generally aren't terribly shiny. And so I've taken some baking flour, laid it out on a pan, and I've just baked it multiple times until it's gotten nice, crisp, and browned. And then I'm going to be putting this in a sifter and taking my blow dryer and dusting the webs, dusting the whole room, just so it just looks like nobody's been in here in years and years. You also definitely want to wear either a dust mask or a respirator because this has the potential to irritate your lungs. Okay, well that worked out really well. One other step I think I'd like to try in the future is before, applying the dust method, maybe spritzing the webs with a simple syrup or just like sugar water. And I think that would create a tacky surface for the dust to really grab a hold to. So in the future, I'm definitely going to give that a try. Now I'm going to start adding some lights to all of the little bowls and cups that I'm going to be putting dry ice in. And I'm using these really fun little light up balls that my mother-in-law sent me. This brand is called Aogist, and they were so much fun to play with. I took a little bit of airbrush paint and tinted them green. Once they were dried out, I dropped them in the random cups and bowls that I wanted to use. And then after that, I ordered some dry ice from a company called Brown Carbonic, and they just brought it directly to the house. And then you put that in these little bowls and cups, and then you pour very hot water over that, and it just creates the most beautiful, smoky, glowy effect. And it is all finished, and I love it so much that I kind of think I want to leave it like this even after Halloween. I don't know if I'm going to do that. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and that you hopefully found a bunch of different things that you can do around your own house this Halloween. I will leave links below to all of the products that I used, so if you're interested in any of those, you can check them out. And I am just dying for you to see what is coming in October because it is just going to be the best Halloween ever. So until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again very soon.